Ahkon Sampayo Cholin, and as always, we're thrilled to have you join us today for a teaching by Jetsunma Ahkon Lhamo. Today's teaching was given in 1990. The title of the teaching is How to Have Pure View of Your Teacher or Your Guru, whatever you're calling your teacher. So we join her now.
Well, I would like to talk with you as well about this fortunate event that is about to come up, Rinpoche's visit. The reason why this is so important to me, of course, is because Rinpoche is my root guru, and I feel about him as I would about Lord Buddha himself. To me, Rinpoche is a living Buddha, and he's everything that there is. There isn't anything else besides Rinpoche. And I feel comfortable saying that because in my practice, I try to understand the true nature of the guru rather than thinking of the guru as a man or somebody out there, and thinking of them as a particular person having a gender and having a certain look and a certain attitude and that sort of thing. But I try the nature of the guru as being synonymous with the precious awakened state, which is the state called Buddhahood. And that's an important thought to hold because it gives us a clue as to how to think about our teachers. When we look at the different yanas or vehicles that are practiced in Buddhism, there are actually three. One is the Hinayana or Theravadan point of view, one is the Mahayana point of view, and one is the Vajrayana point of view. In the Hinayana or Theravadan point of view, mainly one wishes to attain the egoless state. And these are all teachings of the Buddha. They build upon one another. They're not separate from one another. They build upon one another in the same way that you would say the roof of the house is the same house as the foundation of the house. And they're not separate. You couldn't take the foundation out from the house. In order to have a roof, you've got to have a foundation. So in this way, these three yanas build one upon the other. The Hinayana or Theravadan point of view wishes to attain the egoless state. And that egoless state is viewed as the state beyond suffering. In fact, it is viewed as the only true cessation of suffering, because anything else that we can do, including manipulating our lives or our emotions or our perceptions or our minds in any way, these things will only bring temporary results. And the example that could be used is perhaps if we felt we were suffering from poverty, we might feel that the best thing to do is to go out and get a really good job and make lots of money and bring lots of money home and then spend lots of money. And then we would feel as though we were free from poverty. But in fact, according to the Buddhist point of view, we can only be bringing ourselves some kind of temporary gain, because while we might solve the problem in that moment, what will happen is if we have the karma of poverty within our mind, it will reoccur. If we're not doing anything to change the karma of our mind, that is to say, the desire and ego clinging that make up the cause and effect relationships that bring us poverty. If we don't do anything to purify the karma of selfishness that we have probably had somewhere in our distant past that has contributed to our poverty, then we're only bringing ourselves some temporary result. And so, according to the Buddha, yes, go ahead out and get your good job. Go ahead and eliminate temporary suffering in whatever way is possible. The Buddha actually has given us prayers by which we would pray for the temporary well-being of sentient beings. Yet at the same time, we should understand that this is temporary benefit, that it arises from cause and effect relationships that come in the world, and that the only real ultimate benefit does not arise from the world. It is extraordinary, it is particular, in that it does not arise from the world, and its result is not of the world. Because the result, when one practices properly, would not only be the alleviation of physical poverty or temporary poverty, but would actually be the cessation of all suffering associated with poverty or anything else, so that there would be no cause and effect relationships that create or build up poverty. And that is the ultimate goal. That goal is only attained in the egoless state, when desire ceases, as desire is the cause for all suffering. When the ego is no longer clung to, so that cause and effect relationships no longer arise, there are then no more building blocks by which suffering and ordinary view can be built. In the Mahayana point of view, one actually practices the egoless state, yes, but one really concentrates on, one really thinks about the accumulation of meritorious activity, and particularly one practices compassion. That is the main bone and muscle of the Mahayana view. It's the practice of compassion. Compassion is considered to be, upon awakening to the primordial state, indistinguishable from one's own nature. That is to say, one's nature, when revealed in its awakened state, always results in compassionate activity. So it's indistinguishable from one's own nature. But in another view, compassion is also considered to be, for us, an antidote. We practice compassion as an antidote, actually, to selfishness or self-absorption. And in that way, we are still practicing the egoless state. We are still practicing the cessation of desire, because we are practicing in such a way that all sentient beings are equally important with ourselves, to the degree that our lives become like a vehicle for bringing benefit to others. That very practice, and nobody comes by it naturally, nobody wakes up suddenly with great compassion. Everyone starts off the same way, practicing compassion in a very controlled, contrived, actually, in the beginning, and disciplined way. I have a lot of people come to me and say, well, I can certainly never be a Buddhist because I'm not very compassionate and I don't much care what happens to everyone else. Well, welcome to the club, because neither does any other sentient being until they practice real discipline. If you have a real caring for the welfare of others, and if you do things in your life that brings about happiness for others, it's because in some time in the past you have done something to purify your mind stream. You have practiced. And through some kind of pure act or discipline, you have loosened up that fixation that every sentient being has on ego. All sentient beings have as the basis of their perception the belief in self-nature as being inherently real, and a fixation on self-nature. And that fixation on self-nature always results in activity that brings about the confirmation of self. Everything that we do, often even kind things, bring about the confirmation of self, or the continuation of self. We're all trying to be happy. So when we engage then in compassionate activity, we do so in a very disciplined fashion. We begin, for instance, by saying wishing prayers in order to bring about benefit to sentient beings. Well, that doesn't come naturally to us. You know that it doesn't come naturally to us. As little children, as young adults, and as full-blown adults, we're thinking about what we can do to be happy. We're thinking about our jobs, we're thinking about our families, we're thinking about our lives, we're thinking about how to make things all right. And so we begin to change that clinging by beginning to engage in wishing prayers. Then we go on from that to actually accomplishing meritorious deeds. We actually begin to practice for the benefit of sentient beings. We actually begin to shape our lives into what can be considered a vehicle by which we will be able to benefit sentient beings. We make our lives a vehicle in which we attain enlightenment. And in attaining enlightenment, we are then of ultimate benefit to sentient beings. So we really think in that way, and we try to do what we can to feed the poor and heal the sick and that kind of thing. Now, in the Vajrayana point of view, the meat and bones of the practice is the practice of pure view. Pure view is a very difficult concept to understand. And I know from my own experience with my own students and with meeting other Dharma practitioners that it is very often not understood at all. It's an easy concept to misinterpret because of our tendency to analyze everything. And that's why I began this teaching with talking about how important it is to internalize one's practice and not think of it as something out there, but instead to examine one's mind and practice with courage. Because of our tendency to externalize everything, to see all phenomena as external, to feel ourselves constantly either bolstered up or victimized by external phenomena, to not realize that all things are an emanation of our own mind. All of these tendencies come into play here and make the practice of pure view very difficult. Because we tend to think that in order to practice pure view, we have to take what is, that is to say, what we perceive to be solidly out there, and dress it up to be something else. And that isn't the practice of pure view at all. In fact, that's a little bit like a child putting on their daddy's clothing. It really doesn't make them a grown-up. If we take phenomena and dress it up in a certain way so that we pretend that something is different than what it seems, what we are actually doing is we are actually, in a more solid way, clinging to phenomena as being inherently real and solid, and not purifying our view whatsoever. When we practice pure view, well, there are many different ways to understand it. Within the context of a puja or a sadhana practice, one generates oneself, and this is, if you don't know anything about what we do here or the kinds of practice that we do, this may be a little out in left field, but I hope that you will bear with me and try to listen. Maybe you'll get a clue as to what I'm talking about. In terms of puja practice or sadhana practice, one actually generates oneself as the deity, as the Buddha or Bodhisattva. And in doing that, one first, in order to accomplish that, allows the mind to relax and becomes absorbed in shunyata, relaxing the mind, allowing the mind to become more spacious, allowing all conceptualization to simply do what bubbles coming to the top of a lake do. They simply do what bubbles do, allowing all conceptualization to just go without clinging. One abides spontaneously in that state, and from that absorption arises, instead of in the usual way with fixation on self, which is the experience that sentient beings have, one arises from the natural state fixating immediately and compulsively on self-nature as being inherently real. Instead of that, one arises from that natural state with compassion, with the impulse of compassion, compassion being indistinguishable from that state. And the nature is revealed in a pure emanation form. That is to say, there is a movement or a dance or an emanation, but it is indistinguishable and the same as, in all ways, the same as that primordial wisdom nature. There isn't any fixation, that's the difference. One views one's nature to be that pure, spontaneously arising, naturally complete emanation form. So one meditates upon oneself as the Buddha or Bodhisattva. As the Buddha or Bodhisattva, one does not have ego clinging. The qualities of the Buddha are pure. They are luminosity. They are compassion. They are stability. Like that. Without making a grocery list. Having all the qualities of the nature without any fixation on ego or on self-nature as being inherently real. So there's no desire. There's no need to view phenomena as being relative to self because there's no clinging to self. Perception then doesn't take place in the way that it does for sentient beings. That is to say, it is not based on ego clinging. So one views the environment not as something that is relative to self-nature. One views it not with clinging, but views it in its pure essence. One doesn't change the environment, but instead one views it in its pure nature, in its pure essence, without the ego clinging. One realizes the nature of that. Now in the puja, you're going to hear that you're going to visualize the phenomena as a celestial palace or some such thing. But do we understand what that pure view really is? It is understanding the environment in its true nature. As a spontaneously arising, naturally liberated emanation, free from contrivance, free from clinging. And the mind remains stable in that. All sentient beings are understood to be that nature as well. They are understood in their essence, and they too become the Buddha. So that is the pure view in the sense of sadhana practice, in a nutshell. This is really serial box top version. Now back to the teacher, because that's where we started. When we see the teacher, in Vajrayana, devotion is very important. When we see a teacher, we are told again and again and again that we should have that devotion, we should cultivate that devotion. P.S. Nobody is born with devotion. Again, I have had so many students come up to me and say, I just don't think I could practice Vajrayana. I just don't have that kind of devotion. Well, again, welcome to the world, because nobody does. If you naturally feel that devotion, if it naturally arises, first of all, you should examine whether you are really having an emotional experience. If you're having an emotional experience, don't put much stock in it, because like all other emotional experiences, it will go away. They come and they go. You know that. Emotional experiences are all temporary. If you find that you're having a truer and more stable feeling of devotion, then I would say that generally that means that you have practiced at some point in the past, and through discipline, you have a sense of the nature of the teacher. But it always happens through discipline. It always happens through practice. At some point. What is this devotion? What is the basis of it? What are we supposed to be feeling here? What is this? What is this pure view we're supposed to have with the teacher? The most unfortunate thing about sentient beings is that when they try at first to practice pure view with their teacher, what they do is generally what they do when they practice pure view with anything else. They take the teacher and they dress it up. And they try to make it look like something else. They decide what the teacher is supposed to be. The teacher is supposed to be virtuous. Well, they decide what virtuous is also. then they decide the teacher is supposed to be kindly in a certain way, or teacher is supposed to physically look like something. And what they do is they pretend that the teacher that they're viewing doesn't look like what they see, but instead looks like what their idea is about what a teacher should be. Well, you might as well be out playing hockey, because that has nothing to do with pure view, and it really isn't accomplishing anything at all. In fact, it can really sink you in deeper into just the very kind of rigidity and ego clinging that you want to get away from. How should we practice pure view then? Well, when we look at the teacher, it's not our job to manipulate phenomena. That's not what we need to do. We're not in charge of it, and frankly, it does no good. What we need to do instead is we need to understand what the nature of that appearance truly is. We have to look past the way our perception looks at external phenomena, and we have to see that the way that we look at external phenomena occurs because of our concentration or fixation on ego as being essentially real and very solid. I mean, even in the very simple ways in which we perceive a person who is outside of us. I perceive you as being so far away. So far away means so far away from me. How far away you are from me depends on, it's a relative kind of thing. It depends on how big I am. I can understand how far you are away from me according to how big my body is and how big yours is. You see what I'm saying? I can understand whether you're alive or dead because I can come up to you and I can feel whether you're hot or cold. Hot or cold is relative to me. If I were a lizard, cold would be different than what it is to me as a human. So everything that occurs in that kind of perceptual field is relative, and it's really relative to that fixation on self-nature as being inherently real. When we look at the teacher, we ought to try not to look that way. We ought to try not to say, well, he or she is short, or so far away, or color skin, or gender, or whatever, personality. We ought not to be looking in that way because that kind of perception is the same ordinary perception that we have been doing since time out of mind. Hasn't gotten us enlightened yet. It's probably not going to get us enlightened now. So we don't want to think in that way. But instead, we should be thinking of the teacher in a different way, a way that requires some discipline. And it has nothing to do with spontaneous emotional reaction. So stop waiting for the Hallelujah chorus, because that doesn't matter. In fact, if you hear it, it's the wrong religion anyway. Just a little joke there. So you look at the teacher and you try to understand what that is. Now, what has happened here? Let's take this real slow so that we can really concentrate. What has happened here is that something has appeared in your life. If you begin to come and take teachings from a teacher, and if you find that the teacher passes all of the qualifications necessary and can give you the path and can help you to practice the path and so on and so forth, and you have a good connection with the teacher and you feel that the teacher speaks to your mind, and these kinds of things are happening. If all of the qualifications, which I have gone over in different classes, in other classes, and you can get tapes on it for yourself, have been met, and you are being taught a pure path, and that pure path has led others to enlightenment and will lead you to enlightenment, and it comes from the mind of the Buddha, then you should think like this. You should think the appearance of that teacher in my life has changed, and you should examine that change. What usually that means, if you really are practicing with a teacher who is offering you the path that leads to enlightenment, the usual change that is occurring is that so far you've been dancing around in samsara, engaging in ordinary cause and effect relationships, but now you are involved in a different kind of activity. And that different kind of activity results in enlightenment. You are practicing a path. You are taking teachings. You are learning about your mind. You are having your mind, you're actually having your mind revealed to you. The nature of your mind is being revealed to you. You actually are engaging in stabilization, the gentling, the purifying of your perception, so that in time to come, you will be able to view your nature as it is, suchness, in a stable and effortless way, without fixation on ego. This process has begun to happen. There is no other process like that. That kind of process cannot occur under ordinary circumstances. I mean, you won't just like go to the gas station and suddenly have the nature of your mind revealed to you. It's not likely that that will happen. If it does happen, it's because you practiced so hard in the past and your mind was so ripe that anything could have done it. But what has happened is that the quality of your life, the circumstance of your life, everything has begun to change. There actually is something that has appeared to you as the path that must also be understood as the result. Because the path is the same as the result. If the path leads to the result, it is the same. The seed is the same as the fruit. When the teacher appears in your life, you should understand that to be indivisible from and inseparable from your own nature. Because what is revealed ultimately when one attains enlightenment is that nature. There isn't an external deity that comes. There isn't a union with something outside that comes. What happens is what happens to the Buddha. And the Buddha described it as being simply awake. So the teacher must be understood as inseparable from your own nature, from that very nature, which is the precious awakened state. What does the teacher bring to you? The teacher doesn't bring to you cornflakes, doesn't bring you breakfast. Teacher doesn't bring to you necessarily ordinary things in your ordinary life, but what is actually being brought to you is the method or the way by which one might attain enlightenment. The way in which that was originally brought to the world according to our teaching in this age is through the miraculous appearance of the Buddha. So that teacher has to be understood. Now hear this is the important part, has to be understood as an extension of the Buddha's miraculous compassion. When you look at the teacher then, you're not going to be changing his or her clothes. You're not going to be looking at how short or tall he or she is. You're not going to be looking at gender. You're not going to be looking at personality. You're not going to be looking at any of those things. What you're going to be looking at is the appearance of the Buddha's miraculous intention in the world. That compassionate extension, which is the lifeline by which all of us will achieve supreme realization. So you look at the teacher and try very hard to realize that essential nature. The basis is the same as the path. The path is the same as the fruit. What we see is the dance of enlightenment. What we see is the nectar that we drink in order to taste the nature that is our nature and to achieve the state that is beyond suffering. So with discipline, we should learn to view the teacher in its essence. It doesn't mean pretend the teacher isn't a certain way. And one of the things that I catch students doing that is really a problem, actually it's a symptom, it's an indication of a problem, That is, that if the teacher does something ordinary, like burp, I hate to be crude, but what the ordinary things that people do, have digestive problems, or blow their nose, or make a joke that doesn't fly, or something like that. What I see students doing on a regular basis is to say, oh, that must be miraculous. No, it's a burp. But what you're supposed to do is realize the essence of that burp and where it's coming from. You don't dress it up and take it out. It's just a burp. But you must realize the event that's happening before you in a deeper way, in the heart, rather than just trying to make yourself crazy like a druggie, and go, that was a miraculous thing that just happened, kind of like that, and pretend. You're not supposed to be a Barbie doll. You're not supposed to pretend. You're not supposed to fake your way into enlightenment. That never works. But you're supposed to realize the event in front of you for what it is. It's very clear what it is. You've changed. You're taking teachings. You're practicing the path that will lead to enlightenment. So it's like you have to get yourself together and say, how can I take the best advantage of this? I mean, the water's flowing now. What do I do? Don't waste your time sitting around faking out. Don't waste your time sitting around pretending it's happening, which you're clearly having right in front of your eyes. Get the real picture. And the real picture is that when the Buddha's activity appears in the world, it is an extension of his enlightenment. It is an extension of the rich potential for one's own enlightenment. It is an extension of one's nature. Ultimately, when the path is well traveled, and all of the nectar that the teacher gives has been consumed, and everything has been tasted and practiced and brought out completely, ultimately, there will only be the precious awakening. That stable, spontaneous, natural, liberated state. That pure luminosity, that non-specific awareness. And all phenomena, all that has ever occurred, will be indistinguishable from that pure awareness. What does that mean for us? What that means is that when we see that miraculous activity, we are seeing our own mind. It is our tendency to externalize everything. It appears in an outward form, but this is our nature. We should think of the teacher as the boat to liberation, the door to everything. We should think of it as the nectar of our own minds. We should think of it as our own mind. We should think of it as inseparable from the final cessation of all suffering. And we should think of the teacher and the path as being the only means by which we can bring relief to all sentient beings. So when a teacher, such as my teacher, comes to the world, I have to think how I can best take advantage of it. And I'm talking to myself right now, because these are important things to think of before such an opportunity as this comes. I hope that you will make some attempt to try to practice this pure view in this deeper way. I really hope that you won't allow yourselves to simply dress up phenomena in a way that you think is holy, but allow yourself to sink deeper into a purer kind of perception and understand what's in front of you and be able to take advantage of it. My teacher, this teacher, has a particular habit of making himself look very ordinary, very funny. And I think that he does that out of great compassion to us, so that we can recognize ourselves. But that's very hard for us to do, since we tend to externalize all phenomena. We see him as a funky man. But in truth, he is our nature, appearing in the world in a form that we can understand and can consume. And that's a very kind thing to do. Another example of the Buddha's enormous kindness, inconceivable kindness. So I hope that when you meet him and when you see him and when you develop a real connection with any teacher that you feel can nourish you, you will try to practice pure view in that way. Don't waste your time trying to change things around. Things are what they are. Your job is not to fix the outside world. You're not in charge of that. I mean, nobody has ever given you that job, and even if you took it on, it would be strictly volunteer work because you'll never get paid for it. Your job is to do something about your own perception, because that's the real event that's happening here. It's a perceptual thing. We externalize phenomena so we don't see our own nature. We remain fixated on self so we don't taste our own minds. We have no acquaintance with our nature. So what we should do then is to practice pure view and purify that perception. Stabilize the mind, relax the mind, so that that nature can be viewed in its pristine stability. So I thank you very much for coming today, and I really hope that you enjoyed this teaching. And the thing that I say at every teaching, and probably will have to say again today, is that this teaching will be valuable to you if you practice it in some way. If you are a Buddhist, you know how to practice it. If you're not a Buddhist, I hope that you will still take it into your heart and examine your own mind with courage. Examine it. And try to practice this kind of purity in whatever way is possible for you.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Christmas Day. I know just about everybody's been off, celebrating with family or friends or, whatever you do on this day to mark the celebration. But I'm glad you joined for this much of the teaching, and we hope to see you often. We do show these teachings of Jetsunmas on Wednesdays at 7:30 in the evening and Sundays at 11 a.m. They are from the past. All of them really, unless we get our teaching live, are from before now. But they go way back into the 80s, and so it's really a delight to see, re-listen and re-engage with them. So I hope you enjoy them as much as I do. We also have meditations on Saturdays and Sundays at 10 a.m. Also on YouTube, where you are now. Medicine Buddha, a short condensed practice Jetsunma gave us at the beginning of COVID, is on Facebook, and it's at 7 p.m. every evening. It takes about 15 minutes. It's done mostly in English, and come join us. We would love to have you. Let's see. Also, we have Silk food offering ceremony every day. It's Monday through Fridays, usually at 5 p.m., Saturdays at noon, Sundays at 2. To find out, the scheduling for sure, you can always go to tara.org, our website, and go to the calendar, which is under Meditate, Pray, Study, and it's that first one. It will say webcasts and calendar. And you just click on the event, and it will tell you where it is, on what social media vehicle it is, and how to get there, what the codes are, and also a link to the practice so that you can join in with us. And we always welcome your joining us. It's lovely to see you. We have we're also doing for the next until January 22nd on Sundays. At 12:30 p.m. we are doing a Chinrezi Sewer and 100 deity practice. This is done after people have died. It's frequently done on the day anniversary for their death, and this one is specifically dedicated to Senge, one of our monks who passed away on a Sunday a few weeks ago. So we're going through his 49 days in the Bardo. So we do it for 7 weeks total, and it will end in January. You're also welcome to join us for that. And that will be on Zoom. Boom. Took me a minute. Okay. That's the general calendar for the moment, and we hope you are able to join us with that. The outside is open here at the temple always, dawn to dusk, every day. Right now it's a little chilly, but it's better than it was yesterday. So it is sunny and it's dry, but it is very cold from the storm that's come through. The prayer room is open on today, so it's open on weekends, Saturdays and Sundays from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. So if you wish to come inside the prayer room and spend a little time praying and making offerings, please do. You would enter through the south door, which is the one to the back on the other side of the front door. So if you want to go directly there, you can, or often there's somebody up front to show you around. But just ring the bell and we'll let you in. You must wear a mask and N95, one of those super good ones, so that we know you're protected. And then we're happy to have you, and always happy to have you. So happy Christmas, happy holidays. Next week is New Year's. There's a lot going on here with prayers. There's a lot to pray for, and there's a lot to be thankful for. So we can do both. Have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful day, and be safe. Thank you.